Thank you for listening to Heart Chat Stories. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave a comment and share these stories with someone who might need them. Each story is meant to help you pause, reflect, and think about your own relationships, how you love, how you heal, and how you grow. If you'd like more insight into the stories or want to add one to your next book club, visit graceguidance.com. You can find the full collection there, along with reflection prompts to keep the conversations going. And remember, every story in Heart Chat Stories is a chance to rediscover yourself, one honest chat at a time.
There wasn't anyone around, and Cindy could breathe for a moment. The funeral had been stressful for her and the twins. Mostly for her, the twins were only 2 years old. They would have no memory of their father. Cindy sighed, remembering Thomas's warm, loving, and protective personality. He was 13 years her senior, and taught her so much about what a relationship should look and feel like. Sydney only hoped to find love again, but she couldn't think of that now. Thomas had only been gone a week. She needed time to adjust, and so did her boys. Sydney was relieved to get a moment to herself. Things have been moving at lightning speed since Thomas, her husband of 3 years' tragic death. He'd been working on a motorcycle that was lifted improperly. It fell on him, and although there were people there to help him quickly, he did not survive his injuries. Family support has been needed, but overwhelming. She appreciated the childcare for the boys and the fridge full of frozen meals. The phone calls every hour to check on her mental, and everyone asking if she was okay. She didn't know if she was or not. As Sydney sat at a small table that was sat up further from the rest of the funeral crowd, Sydney rested her head on her hands and took a deep breath. "Here, I brought you a drink. And don't worry, the top is still closed." A low, husky voice lured her out of her thoughts. Sydney looked up into the kindest eyes a man could have, yet mysterious. She'd never seen him before, but he seemed like she knew him. "Thank you," Sydney said. "Rosar, may I?" he said as he motioned to the seat in front of her. Sydney didn't want to be rude and motioned yes. She opened the drink Rosar had brought to her and took a sip. Rosar sat across from Sydney in his own deep thoughts. Neither said a word. Sydney had come to this spot for a moment to be alone, but somehow she was okay with Rosar being here, even though she didn't know him. Sydney decided to speak first. "I appreciate the drink and you not asking if I was okay. Did you want me to ask now, or are you okay with me still not asking?" he said with a smile. Sydney smiled. "I see what you did there. You were sitting over here alone. I figured you had been inundated with care questions. I thought you needed a drink more than another thing to think through," Rosar responded. "Yeah, it seems that the grieving widow always needs something," Sydney answered. Rosar stared into Cindy's eyes. "What you need is someone to just be in the space with you, to help you feel safe enough to grieve and not ask questions." That hit Sydney a little lighter than most comments. It felt almost like a grieving pickup line. It made her a little uncomfortable just thinking how caring this stranger was to her. But weren't all the people here caring, like Rosar? This was different. Maybe it was her thinking with her grieving widow mind. Her wanting her husband back. Her wanting to feel his arms around her. Her thinking, who will she love now that will give more to her than she did to them? That was Thomas, and now he was gone. "Thank you," was all Sydney could say. She placed her hand on her drink at the same time Rosar reached to throw the can away, and what she felt was sneakier than a smooth criminal. An unexpected jolt in the bottom of her stomach. She stared at the can as Rosar withdrew his hand. Sydney wondered if there was a widow sex recovery club or something. Had he felt it too? "Mama, mama," she heard in the distance that dragged her out of her thoughts. It was the twins, happy to see her. Her friend Felicia was watching them as they took a nap. Sydney crouched to receive them in a hug. Rosar watched with admiration. I was trying to get them together, and they just ran wild when they saw you, Felicia said breathlessly. One of the twins had left Sydney's arms and pulled on Rosar. He looked over at Sydney and she said, "These are my boys, Trice and Bryce. The one in front of you is Tice." Trice held up his arms to be picked up by Rosar. Trice, baby, Mr. Rosar is... It's no problem, if you don't mind." Rosar cut Sydney off. Sydney shrugged and Rosar picked up Trice. Trice giggled when Rosar jostled him up and down. This made Bryce think he was missing out on the fun and rustled out of his mother's arms to join the two. Rosar played with them both. Felicia leaned in close to Sydney's ear to only where she could hear. Who was that handsome man playing with the boys? Sydney looked at Felicia with a blank look. I don't know. He just brought me a drink and we kind of just shared silence for the last 40 minutes or so. Well, did you ask him? Felicia probed. No, I didn't want anyone asking me questions, so I didn't ask him any questions, Sydney said, twisting her hands in angst. Well, the boys like him, and it looks like you may have to do fallout duty when you pull them away, Felicia said. Sydney noticed that Rosar had some similar qualities of play with the boys as Thomas. His playful sounds, the way he jumped around with them. Maybe she was hallucinating. The sight was heartwarming, yet hard to see. Sydney walked over to Rosar just as he picked up both boys. Let me get them something to eat. They just woke up, and I know they are hungry. Right, boys? The boys were not having the separation. As Sydney tried to get one of the boys, she and Rosar were face to face as the little one squirmed. She found herself studying him more. His lips were nice, and the stubble on his face was cut low, but her could have a full beard if he liked. He smelled like sandalwood and mahogany, and he was very well built. Felicia was right, he was handsome. One of the twins started crying and flailed himself into Sydney's arms. Rosar handed Felicia the other twin. Can I see you again? Rosar said nervously with confidence in an answer. Sydney did not think she heard him correctly. She was shocked but excited. You what? I don't think you meant what you just asked, Sydney said. I meant what I asked. I want to see you and the boys again. Rosar shored up and repeated himself. Sydney sat the twin she was holding down on the ground, and Felicia grabbed his hand along with the other to lead them away. Sydney stood up face to Rosar. He was tall, too. I don't even know who you are, and how you know my husband. Why would I want to see you again? Sydney asked, looking for the answer in his body language. About that. I am supposed to be here because Thomas, Rosar started. Oh no, Felicia said loud enough to jolt them out of their conversation. One of the twins had an accident, and it's running down his legs, Felicia said frantically. Sydney ran over to them and hurriedly grabbed the soiled one and walked him over towards the bathroom. Rosar stood watching as she walked away. It was a cool morning in October, and Sydney had just put the boys down for a nap. They woke up at 5 a.m. this morning, and truth be told, she should be napping as well. But something kept her up. She felt like she was expecting something to happen today. She had both a nervous and exciting feeling. The feeling she got when Thomas walked up to the house when he got off work. She would greet him, and he would pick her and kiss her deeply. Sydney closed her eyes as she could still feel his kisses, felt his hands on her body as they made their way to the bedroom if the kids were sleeping. Sydney looked out the window and could see a vision of Thomas mowing the lawn, hanging the Christmas lights, cleaning out the cars. She was truly spoiled by him. Even in death, he had left her a sizable amount through his insurance policy and some investments that she could live off the interest while it still made money. She didn't have to go to work or place her children in daycare. She could just live until she figured out what she wanted. What did she want? Sydney was about to turn and make herself some tea when a car pulled up to the front of her craftsman-style house. It was a vehicle she had not seen before, a new model Lexus in a dark blue color. She waited to see if the person had the wrong house. She didn't know who would be coming to see her still. It had been almost 3 weeks since the funeral. All of the visit had ceased and there were fewer calls. Just family coming over to see her and the boys every week. Her breath caught when she saw the tall figure emerge from the car. It was Rosar. How had he known where to find her? She hadn't had any contact with him since the funeral, and he was gone when she finished with cleaning Bryce. She had thought of him once or 3 times since then, but only in wanting to know who he was and what he was going to say about how he knew Thomas. As he walked closer, she looked down at her outfit. She had on a sundress with a chunky sweater over it. She thought she was presentable. She opened the door right as he was about to ring the doorbell. "Shh, the boys are sleeping, come in." Sydney invited him in. Sydney quietly closed the door and motioned for Rosar to follow her to the kitchen, furthest away from the boys sleeping. Rosar admired the home, size, charm, and decor. He could tell this was Sydney's domain. Thomas didn't care too much about the things inside the house, as much as the feeling and order of the house. Rosar thought that Sydney must have treated him well, because it looks like Thomas treated her well. Rosar thought Sydney looked beautiful in her dress and sweater. He was nervous about their pending conversation, but it had to happen. He didn't want to get distracted by her natural beauty and grace. As soon as they reached the kitchen, Sydney turned to Rosar with a questionable look. She didn't have to say anything, so Rosar started from the beginning. After he finished, Sydney could no longer stand. She took a seat at the table and just stared out the window. Rosar saw that she had some things out for tea and proceeded to let her digest what he had just told her and made them tea. He looked through her organized cabinets and found all that could be added to the tea, even some whiskey, and placed them on the table. Sydney took a sip of the tea and looked at Rosar as he sat across from her. He peered at her while she drank her tea. "Here we are, sitting in silence again," Sydney said slowly. "Take all the time you need to process what I just told you. I know this is a lot being coupled with the events that happened over the last month, Rosar." Sydney could hear Rosar, but was captivated by his handsome face. He really cared how she felt. He was studying her, and she could feel his hot gaze on her. "I understand all that you have told me, but I don't know why Thomas would hide that he had a son," Sydney said. Later that day, Felicia came over to visit Sydney while the twins were at her parents' house. Sydney could not wait to go over all the details of what Rosar had shared with her about his relationship with Thomas. "So wait, how old is Rosar?" Felicia asked. "We are the same age. He's about 2 years older than me," Sydney replied. Rosar's mom was older than Thomas, and when they got together, Rosar was 10 years old? Felicia's was fact-checking. "Yes, and Thomas raised him as his own. Rosar considers him his dad," Sydney said. "Why didn't Thomas mention he had a stepson? This sounds weird, being that they had a relationship. Where has Rosar been all this time?" "Girl, I need something to calm my nerves." "Wait, one question at a time. I am still trying to process all this." Rosar said he wanted to travel and left the country about 3 years ago. Thomas encouraged him to go. He said it right around the time Thomas and I found out we were pregnant, but he didn't know I was pregnant, Sydney explained. "Wow, this feels like one of the old-school daytime talk shows. Where is Rosar's mother?" Felicia asked. "I knew Thomas was married before, and all he told me was that they needed to get a divorce because she had violated their union," Sydney said. "Okay, my girl, how are you feeling with this information, and what is going to happen next?" Felicia asked. Sydney paused for a moment before answering. "Rosar said he got a place in the city and will take over Thomas' shops. He wants to help raise the boys. I asked him to leave so that I could think about it." Felicia's eyes widened. "What? Oh my God, girl, you just hit the jackpot. You asked him to leave. Why?" "Leash, this is a lot. I know he feels like it is his duty to help out with the boys, but I'm okay. I don't want any drama around this. I prefer no one know, and I just go on about building my life without Thomas," Sydney sighed. No. You know this is what Thomas would have wanted," Felicia protested. If it was what Thomas would have wanted in the case of his death, then he should have told me about Rosar, Sydney stated, almost in tears. Sydney sat on the sofa as Rosar fixed the chandelier that had almost taken her, the twins, out the other day. It was loose a few months back, and Thomas had fixed it, but somehow it wiggled out of the ceiling again. It didn't completely fall, but it almost hit her and the boys as they were coming into the main foyer. Rosar was up on the ladder, and Sydney felt a wave of frustrated tension building between them. There was something brewing, and she really didn't want to misinterpret her time to grieve with her time of need. Rosar was everything, and she wondered why no one had snatched him up yet. It had been a few weeks since he told her about the news of him being Thomas' stepson, and she hadn't contacted him, but he was relentless in contacting her. He had come over and raked the leaves, trimmed the hedges, and even started hanging lights. A few nights, he ate dinner with her and the boys, and tonight he was going to stay and eat again because he said he was cooking dinner. How could she resist him? Truth is, she couldn't, because it felt good to have him around. He was so good with the boys, and they loved him. After he finished with the light fixture, he cleaned up and started on dinner. Sydney walked into the kitchen, and Rosar had already made himself comfortable. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Sydney asked. Rosar didn't look up from what he was doing. "You can have a seat and enjoy the wine I brought." "Wait, you brought wine?" "Rosar, what is this?" Sydney asked. "I told you what it was. Some wine I brought for the grown-ups," Rosar said, as he filled a pot with water. "No, what is this? Why are you here, doing all these things? Where is your girlfriend? Do you like women?" Sydney was blurting out all the things she wanted to know. Rosar stopped and looked at her with a smile. "Are you done?" Yeah, I am done. I want to know the answers," Sydney said as she folded her arms. "Okay, you should know, but first could you open the wine? I am thirsty and I do not want to burn this dish." Rosar smirked as he turned his back to tend to the meal. Sydney did as he instructed, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Very good wine," she observed. Rosar began. "I am here because when I needed a man in my life, whom I chose to call my father, I had one. He taught me all the things a man should do. One of the things he taught me was, when family needs you, you find a way to help that family member. And seeing as though you and the boys have just suffered a tragedy, I want to be here for you as family. I want to help you run the businesses and keep money flowing into the household so that you can focus on being present with the boys. I want to teach the boys all the things their father would have taught them, as if he were here. I owe that to him." Sydney swallowed hard, hearing all that Rosar was saying. She felt his caring heart with every word. "As far as your other question, I do not have a girlfriend anymore. She didn't approve of me traveling, and I just didn't want to give that up. So yes, I like women. No, I love women. I love their shape, the way they smell, the way they move, and I love to study them and bring them the wine they like." Sydney's breath caught on his last words. She was surprised that he would openly admit that he brought her something she liked by studying her and that he was now standing right in front of her. Staring down into her flustered face, she lowered her head. He touched her chin and lifted it to look at him again. "I am not here to do anything that you are not ready to do. If you prefer something, then tell me what it is and I will do as you wish," he said with his lips close to hers. No, Rosar," Sydney said as she backed away from him, almost knocking over a chair. "I will not be seduced in my house. Your dad just passed away. What would it look like us being in a relationship? What would people say? I am not someone that is to be passed around the family. Who will come next if this doesn't work out? A distant grandson I don't know about?" Rosar let out a loud laugh and then turned to finish up the dinner he was making. Sydney needed some air, so she spun around and left out the back door. How dare he make me want him so quickly after my husband's death? Sydney was fuming at the attraction. Rosar was laughing, but he had grown to like Sydney in this short time. She was magnificent, and he could definitely see himself with her. But it had to be on her terms, and as long as there was no one else she chose. He would not choose anyone else either. Rosar gathered his things to leave for the night. He promised he would be back tomorrow to play with the boys and put together the small fortress he had bought for them. He really enjoyed spending time with them and with Sydney. He had meant what he said earlier. He wasn't going to pressure her into anything she wasn't ready for. He knew what it felt like to be hurt. His last relationship had nearly broken him. He thought he was building a life with his ex, but she only wanted to exist. She didn't want a family, didn't want adventure. She said no to everything he craved. So he had gone out to explore anyway, because he couldn't live his life wondering what if. And speaking of what ifs, what if he had taken his chance with Sydney in the kitchen tonight? Would she have resisted? He wished she hadn't freaked out, because he would have made it worth her while, again and again and twice in the morning. Rosar smiled to himself, but he held back because he knew how passionate he could be. His ex used to tell him he had the ability to take her to places she never knew existed. He had learned everything he knew from Thomas. Thomas had taught him that if a woman was properly pleased, a man would never have to ask or beg for her love. He wanted to show Sydney what pleasure meant. His version of it. In time, he would. Sydney lay in bed, finding it impossible to fall asleep. She missed him. And it wasn't Thomas she was thinking about. It was Rosar. That realization made her feel guilty, almost like she was betraying Thomas. Shouldn't she be curled up in grief, crying, screaming into her pillow? But she wasn't. Of course she was sad, but the ache wasn't consuming her the way she thought it would. Instead, she felt as if she still had a piece of Thomas, through Rosar. And she couldn't shake the thought that maybe Thomas had planned this. It was just like him, always looking out for her, always setting things in place. If he couldn't be here, then sending Rosar in his absence. Yes, that would fit his MO perfectly.
Thank you for listening to Heart Chat Stories. Every story is written with love, to heal, to inspire, and to remind you that new beginnings are always possible. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so others can find healing through story. Until next time, keep your heart open and your spirit lifted.